This week on Full Circle Florida, checks, balances, and the U.S. Supreme Court. Justices getting free vacations, free concert tickets, and big money book deals. Is that ethical? Does it corrupt their decisions? And who exactly is watching over the highest court in the land? This week, I get new insight on the third branch and its growing influence. Debate 1, Biden versus Trump. Who needs it more? The ground rules in place, and could this be the moment of truth for the president? I speak with author and presidential historian Talmadge Boston. You don't vote for them, but the 9 justices of the U.S. Supreme Court arguably have more power over you than the president or Congress. They have their job for life, and recently their decisions have been life-changing. From abortion to guns to free speech, no court in recent history has had more potential to transform American society. So when the justices last week released their financial disclosures and it came out that Clarence Thomas has received millions of dollars in free travel from a billionaire friend, and Justice Ketanji Jackson was comped $3,700 Beyonce tickets, and several justices are currently engaged in 6-figure book deals, the questions about whether all the gifts and all the money impact their impartiality seem only logical. We start this conversation with trial attorney Jeremy Rosenthal. What are the standards of ethics regarding judges on the Supreme Court?
Paul, there's really not any. Up until December of last year, there was really nothing in place, and what is in place now has zero enforcement mechanism. Essentially, the Supreme Court has adopted rules which make it the same for ethics as the underlying courts. And that's going to be standard things. That's going to be no conflicts of interest, no appearances of impropriety. The difference is in those lower courts, you can litigate it, and if you disagree with that judge or justice, you can take it to the next higher court. Well, the Supreme Court is the last court, and basically it's in their own hands whether or not they want to recuse themselves, whether they want to take any type of action for any type of disciplinary problem. But basically, it's sort of the trust us model of ethics enforcement, which I think doesn't work. I mean, the Constitution is as phenomenal a document as in the history of the world. But I think when it comes to judicial ethics, there's sort of a loophole in it. There's no real enforcement mechanism, and basically we're subject to them telling us we're ethical because shut up, we're ethical. And that's kind of where we leave it.
Yeah, something magic must happen when you put on that robe. The fact that the justices are disclosing the paid vacations, the free concert tickets, their staff helping them write books on the taxpayer dime, does that disclosure of making money off of their position, does it matter, and does this hurt the court's credibility?
That's going to be what people read into it, right? I mean, there's 2 arguments if you really think about it. On the first hand, there's yes, well, look, we're self-disclosing these things. We're not hiding it. We're putting this out in the open, and so we should be congratulated for that. The other flip side of that argument is no, you guys are so brazen about this that you put it out there, thinking and believing and knowing that we can't do anything about it and we don't care.
In all your years of being a trial attorney, have you ever seen or heard about situations where a sitting judge got a vacation that was paid for, or concert tickets comped, or had their assistant writing their books?
No, never. One thing I can tell you is that on your lower courts, your state courts, your federal courts, there is a lot of attention paid to these types of ethics. And I do think the vast majority of judges take these things seriously, and they do it not necessarily because they can be embarrassed by it or they could be recused in a particular case. I think they do it because they care. There's a lot of people out there who will say, well, money doesn't affect me. And I apologize, but that's nonsense, right? Money affects all of us, and if it doesn't affect us, it affects our appearance.
Jeremy Rosenthal, thank you for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, let's get to the bigger picture now as we bring in USF political science professor Dr. Rob Mellen Jr. Rob, who does the Supreme Court answer to? You know, we talk a lot about the systems of checks and balances in this country, which is perhaps arguably our greatest strength. But what is the check and balance on the high court, a body of just 9 increasingly powerful people?
The Supreme Court can make decisions, but as Alexander Hamilton argued in Federalist 78, there is no power for them to enforce those decisions. So they are reliant upon the executive branch, for example, the president, to enforce decisions. And if the president doesn't like a decision, it's always within their purview to refuse to enforce it or to modify it or give instructions to the federal bureaucracy to enforce it in a different way. So the checks really come from within the body itself. So members of the court check their own power in many ways.
9 people, 6-3, 6 conservative, 3 liberal. So arguably 3 right now have, less power. When you go up against 6, not all decisions are 6-3. But it sounds like if you're talking about the body itself having to regulate itself, and they recently, have to abide by these higher transparency rules that were just passed, and Congress, or at least the body in Congress, wanted to pass even stricter rules, but those were shot down by Republican lawmakers. Does the American voting public, who obviously doesn't vote for the Supreme Court justices, they're appointed, should they have confidence that these folks are making their decisions without being corrupted by billionaire babysitters who are paying for their vacations?
That's a really good question. And I think that we should have confidence in the court. I mean, look at just the decision that was released the other day. That was a unanimous decision by the court regarding the lack of standing to sue over the abortion issue.
Cynicism does take over an election year at times. There are those who have recently criticized the court because they are right now very much in the spotlight as becoming just politicians in robes. And I'm wondering, A, is that fair? And B, if there is to be a higher standard of ethics on the Supreme Court, who would actually enforce that?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think that ultimately would have to be an independent commission that was created. You would have to get Democrats and Republicans in Congress together to create some kind of individual or independent commission that would monitor the activities by the justices.
It's a lifetime job. No one's going to fire them. Dr. Rob Mellen, thank you for your insight. Appreciate it. Still to come on Full Circle Florida, the Supreme Court decision that looms large over the 2024 election and why it could mean everything for Donald Trump.